The Red Riding Hood, presented to you by Caitlin Monroe, Stephanie Garcia, and Brianna Farner. Once upon a time, in an ordinary small town, there lived a young girl known to her friends as Little Red. One day, while Little Red was walking home from school, she received a phone call from her grandmother. "Hello, Grandmother," Little Red said upon answering her cell phone. "Oh, Little Red," came the distraught voice of Little Red's grandmother. "I'm so very sick," she said. "I need you to go to the pharmacy, pick up my medicine, and bring it to me." Of course, Little Red had to help her grandmother. Luckily for her, the pharmacy was just down the road. "I'll be there soon, Grandmother," Little Red promised, and headed into the pharmacy. When she arrived, Little Red was happy to see a friend of hers was working today. "Hello, Little Red," said Jack, the store clerk, as he approached the counter. "Can I help you with something today?" "Oh, yes," said Little Red. "My grandmother is sick, and I need to take her medicine to her," she told him. "No problem," Jack said, and looked up her grandmother's information on the computer. He printed out a piece of paper and handed it to Little Red. "I just need you to sign this," he said. "It just states that you picked up the medicine." Little Red signed the paper, and Jack hurried back to the storeroom. While she was waiting, Little Red began to wander down the aisles. However, little did she know that she was being watched by a group of local hoodlums known as the Wolf Gang. The boys began to ogle her as she walked down the aisle, when one of them noticed her grandmother's information form on the counter. The boys quickly scribbled down her grandmother's address, just as Jack returned. "It's ready, Little Red," Jack announced. Little Red hurried back up to the counter and thanked Jack. "Oh, you've been such a big help," she told him. "Thank you." Little Red quickly put the medicine in her basket and hurried out of the pharmacy. Right after her departure, the Wolf Gang also ran out of the store. Jack watched suspiciously as the gang left, then looked down at the counter. Realizing the hoodlums had seen Little Red's grandmother's information, Jack ran out of the store, only to find that Little Red was already gone. Fearing that she was in danger, Jack pulled out his cell phone and dialed 911. Then he grabbed his bike and went after her. While Little Red was still making her way to her grandmother's, the Wolf Gang had run ahead of her, and were already at the house. They picked the lock on the front door and quietly made their way inside. They searched the house and found Grandmother sleeping upstairs in her bed. Being careful not to wake her, the hoodlums slowly began to creep into her room. Grandmother's house was rather old, though, and when the hoodlums stepped, the floorboards creaked. Grandmother rolled over, expecting to see Little Red. But instead, she was greeted by a gang of intruders. She tried to scream, but her voice was muffled as they grabbed her and dragged her downstairs with a hand over her mouth. They pulled her into the kitchen, just as a side door began to open. One of the gang members hid in the kitchen with Grandmother, as the other two headed back upstairs and hid in Grandmother's bedroom. "Grandmother, I'm here," Little Red announced as she entered and rounded the corner toward the stairs. She headed up, retrieving the medicine from her basket. As she made her way to Grandmother's bedroom, she was completely unaware of the man standing behind the door, and that the person sleeping in her grandmother's bed, wearing one of her grandmother's bonnets, was in fact not her grandmother. Little Red approached the bed, but as she reached over to tap her grandmother's shoulder, the hoodlum whirled around and grabbed her. Little Red screamed, whipping her bag at the man, only to be grabbed from behind. Downstairs, Little Red's grandmother winced as she heard her granddaughter scream. It was then that Grandmother saw a frying pan sitting on the stove. She peered up at her capturer, who was peeking around the corner up the stairs. Grandmother took that opportunity and snatched the frying pan in her right hand and swung. Grandmother then headed upstairs. In the bedroom, the Wolf Gang member pushed Little Red back to the man in the bonnet, who laughed menacingly. The hoodlum then pushed Little Red onto the floor, and she fell with a thud. "Where is my grandmother?" Little Red demanded, glaring up at the gang member as he cornered her. The hoodlum only laughed at her bravery. However, unbeknownst to him, Grandmother was sneaking up behind him with her frying pan high in the air. "Oh, we took care of her," he ensured. Then Grandmother nailed him over the head. Realizing his partner was down, the other hoodlum ran over to attack. Little Red acted quickly and snatched her grandmother's umbrella that lay on the floor. She snapped it open and struck the hoodlum as he approached. Outside, Jack was pedaling hard as he made his way to Little Red's grandmother's, the police whirling onto the street just behind him. Little Red and her grandmother breathed a sigh of relief, believing they'd defeated all the intruders. However, downstairs, the gang member Grandmother had struck first had awoken. He snatched a knife from the kitchen counter and made his way up the stairs with fury in his eyes. As he entered the doorway, Grandmother and Little Red held up their weapons. "I'm going to kill you!" he shouted, but as he stepped forward he felt a tap on the shoulder. He turned around, only to be met by a right hook. When the police arrived, all the intruders were already defeated, so the police arrested the Wolfgang members. "Don't you worry," one of the officers said. "The Wolfgang won't be going anywhere for a long, long time." As the police pulled away, Little Red turned to Jack and said, "You came all the way to my grandmother's house to save me?" "Well," Jack said, "yeah, I guess I—" Achoo! Grandmother's sneeze reminded Little Red that she still hadn't gotten Granny her medicine. "Come on, Grandmother," Little Red said. "Let's get you that medicine." The role of Grandmother was played by Anne Smith. The roles of the Wolfgang were played by Dustin Drever, Chris Goodman, and Adam Hutchison. The police officer was played by Chris Hutchison. Jack was played by Rich Place, and Little Red was played by Caitlin Monroe. Narration by Amberly Hutchison. Photography and presentation by Caitlin Monroe, Stephanie Garcia, and Brianna Farner.